Talking baseball. Baseball and the Orioles.
Oh, welcome back, Birdland, to the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. My name is, of course, Benny Becker, and we got a great episode for you guys today. Got to catch you up on the last 4 spring training games. We got one going on right now, a really good one it looks like. We'll talk about that next episode. So we got 4 games that happened since our last episode that we want to touch you up on. We got some reports out of camp, some things that are just awesome to see, some cool things. We got important news on Cedric Mullins and his injury. And we also want to talk Corbin, Burns, and touch on anything else, Orioles, that seems prevalent in my mind, all right? But let's just jump right into it, gang. Get you up to date on those 4 games that we had. The first one was a win, 10-3 against Atlanta. But when you look at the box scores, nothing huge really stands out to you, truly. The biggest game was Mayo, and listen, he's having a hell of a camp. I'll dig a little more into it as we go. But he went 2 for 4 that game, a home run, a double, and 4 RBIs. You absolutely love to see it. Colin Cowser and Kyle Stowers each went 2 for 3 as well. They remain hot also. These were 3 of the hottest names so far in a very hot Baltimore Orioles camp. In fact, if we look at every camp out there, they have to be one of the hottest, if not the hottest, spring camp right now in both leagues. In Arizona and in Florida. What's happening in Sarasota, I think, is the start of something special. I'm getting that sense that what's happening down there in Sarasota right now, the vibe, the energy, the culture, the great performances, and the wins. Even though the wins and the record don't matter in spring, it's still great to see. I can't help myself. When I look at the Orioles every day and I can't help but want them to win. My mind knows that it doesn't mean anything, but it does. Okay? It does. And it's not a problem if you're not winning these spring games like they have in some years. But this year is special. And that's the vibe that I'm getting out of Sarasota. So, again, we want to touch a little more on some of these guys. I'm going to star Mayo because I do want to get back to him, and we will. Dean Kremer had a very nice outing. That, to me, might have been the best part of that win against the Braves. 4 innings, 4 hits, no walks, 3 Ks, 2 earned runs. The 2 earned runs is nothing crazy. Listen, I'm okay with my starting pitcher giving up 2-3 runs. You want a guy living, give or take, around that 3 ERA. So I'm fine with that, all right? I love the performance. It's great to see him bouncing back off of maybe a slow start in camp for himself. Also, some cool guys that had some great pitching outings that day. And we talked a lot about these guys on previous episodes. In fact, the guy that I'm going to mention now, we talked heavily on last episode, and that was Keegan Akin. 1 inning pitch, no runs, 1 K, 1 hit. Nice outing for Keegan Akin, who's really trying to make this team. We talked about how I think the front office and coaching staff are kind of not against each other by any means, but kind of battling together the thought of, do we want that third lefty or do we want a true long man? And if you want that third lefty, Keegan Akin is the guy that I think right now has the best chance at winning that job. And Keegan Akin was a starter at a point, okay? I think they've given up on him as a starter, but at the end of the day, I still think he probably can go 2, if not 3 innings for you, at least here and there. Okay, so while he's not a traditional long guy, I believe Keegan Akin gives you some ability to push him as a long guy at times, if you will. A huge one to see, and we're going to touch on kind of his counterpart in the minor leagues, but Cade Povich that day also had 3 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 4 Ks, only 1 run allowed, and it was unearned. You love seeing it. Cade Povich is making a serious push to get himself on this roster for a long stretch of the season. I still don't think he breaks camp with them. I truly don't. Because they're viewing him as a starter. I think he's the type that would come into the rotation if, let's say, the bottom half is struggling, the Wells, the Irvins, even the Kramers, okay? If they're struggling and the Bradish and Means are struggling to make it back, and we can't necessarily find a good trade that we think is good value enough because we're not just going to ship everything because we're struggling maybe in the middle to back half of the rotation, I think Cade Povich is absolutely a name. If he continues pitching like this season and truly pitching like he has the past couple years, I believe Cade Povich is a name that you could be seeing starting games for these Orioles this season. Probably come July-ish, June, July-ish. That to me would be kind of that breaking point, just spitballing about where, okay, we don't trust those names in the back half of the rotation anymore. And we see that the injured guys are not progressing how we thought they would. So now we're in that middle ground where let's see what a Cade Povich can offer this rotation. Let's see if he can stick in the majors right now. Either way, it would be good to get him that experience. Hopefully, though, that's not the case. Because that would mean that the back half of the rotation is either injured or struggling. And that the guys injured right now, Bradish, Means, are not progressing to come back. I don't think either of those things are going to happen. Personally, you know how high I am. If you've been listening, you know how high I am on all of the names in this rotation, but certainly the middle to back half. The Kremers, the Irvins, the Wells, especially. You know my affinity for Tyler Wells. At this point, you should. So, I don't think that's going to be the case. And I believe that at least one, if not both of those guys in Means and Bradish, will be coming back healthy at some point this season. Because while we haven't heard a ton of new news on either of them, we haven't heard bad news. And frankly, a lot of times in these situations, no news is good news. We've talked about that before. So seeing Cade Povich step up, it's a good problem to have. It's a great problem to have if you have these studs in the minors who are earning roster spots, but there are no spots on the roster to get because the guys on the roster right now are providing what we need them to as well. Are not only living up to what we thought they would be, but maybe even taking that next step or two forward in establishing themselves, not just on this roster, but in this league. It's very interesting the position that the Orioles find themselves in at almost every single position on the field. Truly. You have almost a major league ready, if not a major league ready, pretty much stud prospect, at least one at every position, pushing guys who are already very good major league caliber players, if not superstars, and pushing them to that next level. I talked about how it's a special thing brewing right now in Sarasota. It's the type of vibe to me that truly has AL pennant to World Series vibes from beginning to end. And I truly believe the Orioles are going to get to that World Series. And it starts in this Sarasota camp. Everything seems to be right. Everything seems to be clicking. I love it. So then we jump to the next two games against the Blue Jays, okay? They were split squad games on that same day. We talked about that in a couple episodes previously about how I thought the Orioles would wait to make first cuts until after that split squad game. Well, they decided to make first cuts earlier, like we said in our last episode, and they were fine in these split squad games. 1-1, tied 1. First tie, I believe, of their spring training. But still amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we're going to dig into them separately, okay? And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on any of these games. In fact, the last game that we're going to touch on, I'm literally going to fly by, okay? So stick with me. We got a lot of good stuff coming. But watching what they're doing in these games is awesome. Awesome. Okay, so in the one split squad game that they tied, it was a 6-6 tie. Okay? And this is something we'll dig into a little more in the episode, but Corbin Burnes had another kind of tough day. Again, we're going to have kind of a segment on it. We're going to talk on it more heavily. I'm not worried. I'm not pressing the panic button on Corbin Burnes. We saw what he did in that first outing, even though it was only an inning, I believe, and it was a beautiful thing. He's had a couple rough outings since then. At the end of the day, a veteran past Cy Young winner, only a couple years out from his Cy Young. I'm not worried about this guy. A brand new team. It takes some time to not only feel good, but actually feel comfortable in that clubhouse. No matter how great the Orioles clubhouse is right now, and the vibes and the energy, still takes some time. If nothing more, you got to figure out exactly where you're going to get your morning coffee on the way in. You got to figure out, I don't know, where one meeting room is as opposed to the other meeting room. Whatever it may be, exactly what backfield you're going to. So, it's not just in the back of your mind. I know that's so stupid. And these are professional athletes, and Corbin Burnes is making a lot of money this year. Not as nearly as much money as he's going to make the next handful of years, especially what I think he's going to do this season. But ultimately, they do kind of take a toll. They take your mindset away because you're thinking about, wait, do I have to go to the one behind left field or right field today? Where am I going exactly? It's just this uneasy feeling. It's like when you start a new job. And first day they show you where the break room is, and they show you where the back door is, and they show you your whole way around the office. And then day 2 comes and you're by yourself and you're looking around going, crap, where was that? Crap, where am I supposed to go? You go to the room, nobody's in there. You know some people should be in there by now, so you're like, clearly I'm in the wrong place. That could be happening to Corbin Burnes. And ultimately, he's working with a new coaching staff. They're probably trying to tweak things here and there. Let him be him. Let him be the pitcher he has been. And if anything, they're maybe trying to learn from him right now before they give him tips on what to improve. Because sometimes as a coach, you need to take this step back and learn about the player. Learn where the player is at before you can start critiquing and adjusting things here and there. Because if you don't take that first step, if you don't get that relationship, if you don't build that trust, when you start trying to tweak stuff, it may come off wrong. It may make the guy forget what he was actually focusing on because you didn't realize that he was trying to focus on something very close or similar that now he can't because of what you're trying to have him do. So getting in that mindset is important. So let's not overreact, Birdland, to Corbin Burnes having some bad outings in this spring. Let's not panic. I believe this is still one of the best moves the Orioles could have made to getting them to that World Series, to getting them that pennant. So no need to panic. But we are going to touch on Corbin Burnes more later in this episode because there are more things that I want to elaborate on. The beautiful thing about those 2 games against Toronto were that it was bombs away, man. It was bombs galore in both games. I'm only going to touch on some of them. Pretty sure there were guys that hit home runs, at least 1 or 2, that I'm not even going to touch on because their names aren't as important to this Orioles team moving forward, even though in the future they might be. So in that first game, the 6-6 tie that we were talking about, you had home runs from Adley, second home run of spring. Cowser continues to hit bombs. McCann and Urias. So we see not only the key cogs in Adley doing it, we see the prospects that look like they're going to play themselves onto this roster in Colton Cowser, but also the veteran role players that we're counting on to be such a big piece for this team's success in McCann and Urias. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, gang. So then when we move to that second game against Toronto, it was an 11-6 victory. Big-time victory. And again, bombs away. We want to talk about veterans that we're counting on. Anthony Santander. Tony Taters. 2 bombs that day, I believe. I believe 3 now in spring training. We talked previously about how he changed his stance ever so slightly. Just a small tweak from where he was at the beginning of camp. Maybe where he was at the end of last season. And we see the results instantly. Doesn't always happen that way. But with Tony Taters, it has. And we talked about how he can be as hot as they come or as cold as they come. And to start camp, it seemed like he was really cold, and now he's very hot. So when I'm looking at Anthony Santander from a distance and the grand picture, while I want to believe, hey, that tweak now is going to send him into stardom, or at least into taking a little next step into consistency. I want to pull back that enthusiasm right now just because, again, he started cold, now he's hot. I need to see him stay at least average when it gets cold. I don't need seeing him going to the tank because then, that again, now the pendulum is swinging. If the pendulum only gets to here and then swings back, it's a beautiful thing. If it's going here and here and here, now we have more of an issue. That's just how it works, gang. So, but again, working on things, trusting the process, and making small tweaks when you see the evidence of why you're not succeeding. When you break down and understand the process of why you're not succeeding, you make a small tweak and good things happen. So Tony Taters, I believe, with 2 dingers that day. Ryan McKenna, talk about a guy who's really trying to keep himself on this roster since he's been here the last couple years, but is very fringe right now with how these young outfielders have been playing, like Colton Cowser. So Ryan McKenna, who I still believe will most likely make this team, at least break camp with this team, had a dinger. And listen, you need the role players to play a factor. If he's going to be one of those role players in the outfield, you need him to come to bat. And we talked multiple times about how clutch he was. And that's one of the reasons I truly want Ryan McKenna on this roster. Not only does he provide another right-handed bat to the bench, but I just love his clutch factor. And yes, if that winds up going away, his value definitely diminishes. However, I want to keep him in there and keep seeing if he can provide those clutch moments and those clutch hits. Because if your bench and role players can provide those clutch hits, it only makes things easier on your stars and really the team as a whole. The biggest of the home runs, though, that day was Jackson Holliday. Not only was it his first home run of spring, it was a massive shot. Now, seemed like the wind was probably blowing out and he might have gone into one of those alleys. But let's not kid ourselves. That ball was smoked. That was a legitimate home run, and that will find its way out of stadiums like Camden Yards, Yankee Stadium, most likely the new Blue Jays Stadium. I really think all the ballparks. Maybe Boston, because while it's very in on the line, it goes deeper quick. So maybe Boston hangs up there and doesn't get out. Tampa probably gets out. And that's just in our division. So, like, that ball was smoked. And it was a grand slam. I'm not sure if I said that yet. It was a grand salami, which just shows kind of the specialness of this kid. And I know it's weird saying that because baseball is this sport where he can't plan to have the bases loaded every time. Like, that's nothing he can control. And yet at the same time, there's just something special about this kid and this ball player that is going to allow him to have moments like that more often. It just makes sense that it's a grand slam. And we've seen the triples and we've seen the doubles. and he's really getting hot. And I'm going to talk about Jackson Holliday later because there is a part about his game, at least in spring training, that worries me. Okay, but we're going to touch on Holliday and Mayo a little later in this episode. I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about it, but the way I felt about talking Kobe Mayo early about that first game and now about Jackson Holliday, I need to elaborate more on these two guys. Okay, but I want to get through these games. Now, just because these guys didn't hit home runs in that 11-6 win doesn't mean there weren't big games. And we're going to highlight just some of the big games. There were a lot of them. Gunnar went 2 for 3. Continues to be hot. I believe, God, I wish I wrote down the number when I saw it. I think he's like 8 of 11 or something at the dish since he's come back from the oblique injury. Truly showing why he's an MVP candidate. And we'll talk about it in the betting episode that we do. And I came close to doing it today. I really did. Because there's a lot of stuff I want to touch on and want to get off my chest. Want to make sure, inform you. Frankly, want to make both of us money. Me and you. A lot of money. But that's the betting episode, okay? Let's just get down to seeing how he's come back and just gone right to the groundstone. Man, it's exciting. It's exciting what we're seeing out of Gunnar Henderson to start camp. Heston Kjerstad, we talked about in last episode, starting to heat up a little. 2 for 3 that day. Continues to heat up. And now he's got multiple multi-hit games in this spring training. Still think he'll start the year in the minors, but he's definitely heating up. And we'll see him this year in Camden Yards. Absolutely. Ryan McKenna, we just talked about, went 2 for 3 that day. With the home run. But Ryan McKenna continues to show why he should be on this roster. And then you got one hit out of Westberg, Mayo, and Norby, some of the young kids. And I love seeing it. Connor Norby is a name that we haven't talked much in this camp, but we should have talked because he's had a great camp. I want to say he's maybe batting like 320, 340, heck, maybe even 360 this spring. And I don't think he has a path right now to the roster. It's just too talented of an infield starting-wise, and even more important, reserve-wise. Now, if Ramon Urias or Jorge Mateo wasn't showing what they needed to, possibly he could break camp with the team. But I think Norby, despite the fact that he probably doesn't need more seasoning in the minors, will find himself back in the minors. That's my gut instinct. Talk about another young kid that we talked about. Well, before I get into that, we talked Cade Povich, okay? And kind of Cade Povich's path to the majors this season, at least his path the earliest as possible, okay? Well, another name that would be in a position to take that spot if those back-end guys are struggling and if the injured guys aren't recovering is Chase McDermott, okay? And once again, he wows also. Again, these are the Orioles' top 2 starting pitching prospects, and they are showing out this spring training. Absolutely dominating. McDermott last outing had 3 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 6 Ks. It's special, gang. It's absolutely special. And those 2 men could very easily have broken camp with many teams around the league this year. Hell, if the Orioles hadn't gone out and gotten Corbin Burns, and yet still had to deal with these 2 injuries to Bradish and Means, there's a good chance that at least 1, if not 2 of these kids would be in the rotation to break camp. But there's no reason to rush them, and the roster is just simply too talented to have them on it. You don't want to waste them in that long role. If you're going to have a true long guy, you have it be Julio Teheran or one of these other guys. You don't need to rush them, but they're great to have in your back pocket, again, if that back end falters and the injured guys are struggling. So, just like Cade Povich, it was a beautiful thing to see Chase McDermott do so well and continue to do so well. Because those are two guys that I don't think they've had a bad outing yet in spring. Knock on wood. But, I mean, spring's essentially towards the end. They maybe only have a couple outings left, and that's if they stay in camp. We saw the Orioles move Seth Johnson, the third of those probably elite starting prospects that we have. They saw him move Johnson already back to the minors. Let him exit Major League camp. So McDermott and Povich probably only have another week or so left. Heck, we only have, I think, 2 weeks and change till opening day. So it's exciting. It's very exciting as the days tick on and we get ever closer to that opening day. I'm thrilled. I'm excited. Now, the last one of those games, Game 18, was a 5-3 loss against the Yankees. I'm not really going to touch on it. One, because I have no interest in this amazing spring training we're having to touch on a loss to the Yankees. I hate the Yankees. I despise the Yankees, the evil empire of all teams for us to lose to. Even in spring training, I hate to see it be that one. But the one thing I'll touch on is Jackson Holliday going 2 for 3 at the dish that day, continuing to stay hot. Okay, so those were the past 4 games. Again, we have one going on right now that's looking good. You never know, though. And we'll touch on that next episode. The next thing I want to talk about is just something that I've been seeing around camp. And this is every spring training, probably for every team. Okay, so this is the type of storyline that only holds so much weight. And that's the old players, the former players, guys that are retired now, guys that were part of great teams coming back to camp and talking with the guys, teaching the guys. And I feel like the Orioles have a great relationship with a lot of these former players. And having them come in and help with some instructions with guys and teaching guys things. And there's in a couple names, it kind of makes me feel old, but that have been in this camp, former players who, how could you not have an affinity for? They were from the most recent Orioles successful run. Okay, those like whatever it was, 14 to 16 teams. Okay, with Adam Jones, Matt Wieters, J.J. Hardy. These are names that I've been hearing in camp that have been talking to guys that have been playing around there. I know I read a story about how Adam Jones and Matt Wieters finally had catch for the first time ever. And you want to be like, they were teammates for a while, man. Well, you got to think, I mean, they were joking, well, the catcher's always in the bullpen. Like, why would I have a chance to play catch with them? But it's just one of those neat things that, like, one, you don't think about. 2, was cool to reminisce on somewhat, those guys being on the field for these Orioles. Because I loved those teams. I absolutely loved that core, that roster. I remember when they started building that, when they made the Adam Jones trade and drafted Matt Wieters, because those were, if I look back, almost the first 2 moves to kind of signal the Orioles have a changing of the guard. The Orioles are coming back. They're building something. That was the time, because as optimistic as I am about these Orioles right now, especially, I'm very realistic about, I feel like everything, but these Orioles as well. So during the 13 straight losing seasons, there weren't many times that I would talk up Orioles. Maybe I'd talk up some of these prospects here, there, this guy, that guy, but Larry Big B, Billy Rowell, whatever whatever names you want to throw out there, man. But ultimately, I'm going to be very realistic when I see what's happening in the grand scheme. So there were very few times where I was optimistic during those losing years. But it was at that signaling when we traded Eric Bedard for Jones, Tillman. It kills me. I can't remember the other 2 names. George Sherrill, and I was thinking about this the other day, and I was pissed that I couldn't remember that 4th name. Still can't. We're getting far away. But essentially, he turned into nobody, especially for us. So it's understandable why I would forget that 4th name. But those were the big three, and that was a huge core. And we also drafted Weeders out of Georgia Tech that year. And it was just the signaling of, oh, we're building something. We have this plan, we have this vision, and it's going to take a few more years, but it's coming. And I was preaching that, I believe it was about 2008, if my memory serves me right, when those moves and draft happened. And yeah, it took about 6 years for it all to come to fruition. But I was very optimistic at that time. And that was one of the few times in my Orioles life that I was able to be optimistic. I mean, I don't want to take right now for granted. Because right now I've waited a lifetime for. I've waited a lifetime for this core, for this team. And it's unbelievable. It makes me so happy. It brings me so much joy to see where these Orioles are at right now. And I was very optimistic, and I saw it coming too in this core a few years ago. And that's why 3 years ago, I was on talking about how the Orioles were coming and how betting them for World Series and AL and over win totals and all of these which ways that I was preaching to bet the Orioles 3 seasons ago, some of which came true. Well, the over win total that year came true. None of the other ones panned out. The division, the pennant, the World Series, any of the Cy Young or MVP or any of those talks. That didn't work out, okay? But last year, a lot worked out. Sure, we didn't get the pennant and the World Series, but a lot of what I'm saying has come to fruition. So I'm very optimistic, but that's because I'm very realistic, and I see the position that the Orioles are in is a position to be very optimistic about. In fact, the most optimistic I should be in my entire life to this point about the Orioles. And obviously there's some hindsight to that because, yes, I thought we were going to win the World Series around that 2014-15 years. I thought we were going to win the World Series back in 96, 97. Neither of those happened. So obviously in hindsight, they didn't get there. Hell, they didn't even get to the World Series in any of those spans. So the ALCS is the closest I came in the late 90s, in the mid-2010s. And I think it's coming again, gang. I think it's coming again. And seeing those guys at camp, again, makes me feel a little old because, God, they really are far away. Like, Weeders and Hardy seem far away from the game. I know Jones has been playing in Japan, but still, majors-wise, it's a long time, for instance, since he robbed Machado's home run on Team USA. That's all I'm saying. Feels like a long time ago, gang. So seeing them at camp, seeing the gray hairs on them and stuff is tough. But it's nice having them around. And they're not the only ones by any means. I'm sure there's other guys from that era of teams. And I'm sure there's plenty of guys from the 90s, 80s, whatever it may be, around that team. I know I've heard other names, but those are just the three that kind of stuck out to me. Jones, Weeders, Hardy. I loved those teams. I absolutely, Nick Markakis was my favorite Oriole of that time, number 21. Can't see it right now. There's a 21 on my back. Okay, it's not Markakis, though. It's Jimmy Key from 97-ish. But, in fact, this is a game-worn spring training jersey from Jimmy Key. Very cool to me. Very cool to me. And I love this jersey. But 21's been a great number. And it was fitting that my favorite Oriole around that 2000, basically from the 2000s on, since Cal left, my favorite Oriole was Nick Markakis. And I know they didn't have an overlap. I know there was probably, I would say, like 4 years apart between them. But I love Nicky Markakis. He's one of my all-time favorite Orioles. So when I wear this 21 jersey, while I wear it proudly with Jimmy Key, and the name Key isn't on it, it's just 21, because again, it was a spring training jersey from the 90s. And they didn't really care about it, putting a name on it or anything. These were interchangeable pretty much probably every year until they sell it in auction, I would think. So they probably only got one each player, maybe two, maybe one in a replacement. I don't know. I want to say this is the one he wore every day down there in Florida, but I've always worn it, at least in the past 20 years. Anytime I've worn it as at least a bit of Nick Markakis because I love that guy. And he was one of my favorites. So I don't know if Nicky Markakis has made his way down to Sarasota or not. I haven't heard his name down there. I haven't seen his pictures, but I wouldn't be shocked for him to make an appearance at some point, if not this year, future years. And I hope he does because I want him to be a part of the Orioles family. I know it maybe ended poorly. They had that stuff with his back injury. They were trying to re-sign him, and then they tried to lowball him or give him kind of a one-year deal when I think the Braves gave him at least 2, if not 3. And he kind of said, screw you, and I don't blame him. But at the same time, I think a part of him might have also seen the writing on the wall as far as the team that they had was kind of disbanding and probably wasn't going to be able to keep it up much longer. And while Atlanta wasn't what Atlanta is now and wasn't what they were in the 90s then, they were at least building something interesting. So I don't blame him. Listen, that happens at the end of a guy's career. All I'm saying is, especially with the changing of the guards, with the ownership, I would love to have Nick Markakis more of this Orioles family than maybe he is now. And again, I don't know how much he is or isn't. So I just hope he has a good relationship with these Orioles, if not now, moving forward. So one of the biggest news from camp recently, at least, was the Cedric Mullins injury news last week. Cedric Mullins came out of a game, I believe, last Monday. Hamstring injury. We were nervous about it. We were worried because a hamstring can linger with you. It's something that I believe he's had problems with in the past. So it worries you. But we had nothing but good news on it. And it seems to be relatively official that he'll be back in games Thursday, okay, against the Pirates, which is beautiful. It's a great thing to hear. It's a great thing to see. Again, that would give him 2 full weeks before opening day. And I'm just hoping there are no setbacks. Not only before he gets back on the field, but once he gets back on the field. Because I love Cedric Mullins. And I love what he brings to this team between the defense and the speed and some power and contact and just his attitude and morale that he brings to this team, I believe is a special contribution. So I love Cedric Mullins, and I want him to be a big part of this team. He's the type of guy who could bat .290 with 25 dingers and 25 stolen bases and be all over this lineup, truly. I don't know if you keep him at the top like they did a few years ago all the time, especially against a lefty, but we'll see what happens. Because I know he had his struggles hard against lefties, but it seemed like those got corrected. It seemed like those were better last year. And if I broke down the numbers, I'm sure the numbers would show that. At least to a degree where you don't have to pull him out of the lineup when a lefty's in. Which is big because we have, again, a lot of these guys, especially in the outfields, that bat lefty or switch hitting, which means they're going to mostly bat lefty. You need some mix. You need to mix it up, and you need those lefties to be able to hit left on left, at least good enough that they're not a liability. Hell, you have enough speed sometimes, just slap it into the ground and make them make a play. See what happens. Because in today's baseball, a lot of teams don't emphasize defense the way the Orioles emphasize defense. The Orioles have potentially the most athletic team in baseball right now, headed into this season. The athleticism all over the diamond is unbelievable. And with great athleticism, typically comes great defense. And we know that some of these athletic individuals can play great defense. Some of them just are unbelievably athletic. But again, that leads to easier defensive moments, making hard plays look easy. That's what athletes do. And having Cedric Mullins out there would be a great thing, not only for the defense, but for the offense and for the team overall. So good news on that front at the moment, but still halfway holding our breath. Because sometimes these things happen. Sometimes there are setbacks. And I know, again, Cedric Mullins has potentially dealt with these problems in the past. And I know that he's communicated about his want to come back sooner than he could or he should have has hindered him in his full recovery in the past. So because of that, he's learned that if I'm not ready to go, let's not push it. And I think that's fine because while as much as I love him and as much as he could be a big factor on this team, he also isn't a necessity to this team achieving its ultimate goal. And that might be tough to say. That might be a tough pill to swallow. But it's true. And especially when we look at guys like Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Ryan McKenna. Some of these guys that can step up and fill the positions. I'm not saying I wouldn't love to have Cedric Mullins out there. All I'm saying is that I don't want him rushing back because I'd rather have him in the big picture than a short term leading to a re-aggravation of the injury. That's all I'm saying. On a side note, gang, I hit the McDonald's today. This isn't a sponsorship, but truly, Coke from McDonald's just tastes maybe better than any drink out there. I know the whole they put them in the, I don't know. I'm not going to dig into it. If you want, you can look it up. I know the reasoning behind it slightly. All I'm saying is sometimes you need to go get a Coca-Cola from McDonald's. Today was that day. It's a beautiful spring day outside. And I was like, heck, let me get a Coke. But unfortunately, this cannot fit into my Orioles koozie. So we're rocking both today because there's no way I do an episode without this koozie. Correction, there's no way I would want to do an episode without the koozie. If I have to do an episode without the koozie, so be it. So, next topic. We talked about how Mullins is coming back on that Thursday to play the Pirates. So they kind of have this cool thing going on this year in Major League Baseball spring trainings. I'm not sure if you've heard about it. It's called the Spring Breakout game. Basically, it's like a prospect showcase for certain teams. Not every team is doing it. Only about 8 teams, I think, give or take, are doing it. But the Orioles were one of them. Pirates, obviously, are one of the other ones. And they have a ton of interesting prospects themselves. But we're not the Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. We're the Baltimore Orioles podcast. So that's what we're going to focus on. So Thursday, they have that spring breakout game. So it's going to be a bit of a split squad game, even though it's not a true split squad game because not everybody on the breakout roster has to be in Major League camp. I'm pretty sure. I didn't look over the rules too much for this, but it's still interesting nonetheless. And it's getting publicity for the same reason the Orioles-Pirates game early in camp was getting publicity, and that's essentially because you have Jackson Holliday, former 1 overall and number 1 overall prospect, facing Paul Skeens, last year's 1 overall, and maybe the top pitching prospect out there. Last time went Paul Skeens' way. This time, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm not even positive Paul Skeens will be on the bump. I'm not sure if MLB has mandated him doing that sort of thing, or maybe not mandated, but kind of like nudge, put him out there for the good of the game. I'm not sure if we're going to get that or not. Either way, it's exciting. You're going to see a lot of Orioles prospects. I didn't write down the list of all the guys. We're going to have Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo's there, Colton Cowser's there. I believe Heston's going to be there. Povich, I believe, is there. Maybe McDermott as well. You got a lot of these big names there. Sam Basallo, I believe, is playing in that game, who just played in his first spring game of the year. So maybe he's a little rusty, but at the same time, it's great to see him back out there because Sam Basallo is a guy who moving forward for this team could potentially find himself in a big position, whether it's catching, whether it's first base, whether it's DH at some point, whether it's this year or moving forward. Remember, he's coming back from that small elbow injury, so he's probably going to DH a lot, especially in the beginning half of the season, if not most of the season. We'll see how that plays out. Again, he's 19 years old. He still has a lot to go. I don't think that he's really going to make the Major League roster. Possibly when the rosters expand, I could see maybe them giving him a look here and there, but we'll see about that. We'll see what happens when it comes to Sam Basallo. Either way, not only is it good to see him out there, when you see the hacks he's taken, even if he's missing, God, you see what's impressive, because you see these hacks and you're like, man, if he made contact on that ball's going to fly. So, again, he might be a little rusty. He's about 2 weeks behind most of these guys when it comes to live game action. So, yeah, absolutely, that's probably going to happen a lot. But let him get involved in this season. Let him do his thing. I'm sure we're going to see good results soon from Sam Basallo. So, we talked about Corbin Burnes a little bit earlier and how he's had some struggles so far in this camp. Well, that can happen at times. For a major league veteran especially, you stop caring maybe about the results. You start working on the process more. The results will come. And also, just to get up for a spring training game sometimes can be a little tough. Truly. You know it's a fake game. It's like preseason in the NFL. It's just not the same. So when you've done a real major league game, when you've been a part of serious major league games, postseason games like Corbin Burnes has, it's a little hard maybe to get up for that spring training game. It's something similar to we talked about Craig Kimbrell and how he hasn't had the best success at times this spring training. Well, for a closer, when you're coming in the fifth inning of a spring training game, it's hard to really get that same juices flowing as going out into the ninth of a real game. While Corbin Burnes is starting in the first, just like he will be in the regular season, it's just not the same. The energy at Camden Yards on opening day is going to be electric. And as great as these spring training games might get some electricity and have, they usually have a full crowd, or at least mostly full crowd, that are into the game. It's just not nearly the same. So don't worry about Corbin Burnes. He still has great stuff, and we've seen that at times, especially remember his first outing. Not only was he dominating, but he was hitting his pitches low in the zone, fastballs, breaking balls, getting the accuracy, hitting the spots. I'm not worried about him. He's the ERA leader since 2020. Okay, so I don't think there's any way he doesn't pitch successfully for this Baltimore Orioles roster. And I believe that there's a very good chance that he's at the top, if not near the top, of the Cy Young almost the entire year for the American League. I love the idea of Corbin Burnes having this career season going into free agency. I talked about it, I think, in the first episode about how he didn't come across as the type of guy to get worried about that contract situation coming up. Again, I think he's making near like 12, 14 something million this year, give or take. He's fine financially, okay? So he doesn't have this exorbitant life. He doesn't have to. Obviously, you want to make as much as possible, but he's not worried about his financial situation, it seems like. So because of that, I truly believe he's the guy that's not going to let that affect his play, not let that get in his head. And I don't think that's what we're seeing this spring. Again, I think it's more just getting used to a new facility, getting used to new people around you, getting accustomed to the new things in front of you and learning the little things like what room to go to and how to go here to here and where to go get coffee and new things that you took for granted in a place that you had been to a lot of times. And now you're in a new place and you're like, it's similar, but it's just not the same, man. And if I remember correctly, the Brewers, I'm pretty sure, do their camp out in Arizona, right? It would make sense to me they do. And I'm almost positive they do. But especially if that's the case, now you're not even going to camp in Florida. Or like before you were in Arizona, now you're in Florida. You're in a whole different state. It's not even like, one you were in Clearwater and now you're in Sarasota. Oh, it's different, but it's this. No, it's pretty night and day, the two places, right? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Just don't worry. Be still excited about it. Let him get into his routine, right? The great thing about Orioles fans are while we do want and expect good players to play good, we're not the type of fan base that's going to get on you and rile you over a bad spring, right? We're not going to riot over a tough spring training, at least a couple tough spring training starts. So the Birdland is not going to be, Birdland's going to be behind them, is essentially what I'm saying, in a positive way. We're going to let him give himself time to figure it out. And if it takes a couple starts into the season, that happens. All the time, these elite guys, especially elite pitchers, start off with a tough April and then figure it out come late April, May, June, and then they're rolling once July and August come. It happens a lot. Got to figure it out, man. So don't worry. It actually got me thinking, the Corbin Burns, when was the last time the Orioles had a Cy Young pitcher or a past Cy Young winner as their opening day starter? Anybody? Anybody want to tell me? It was Pat Hennigan. I think that was like 2002 or 2003, I believe. Let me tell you, not only did he not have this unbelievable career, but he was like 6 years out, 5-6 years out after he won that Cy Young. And his first two seasons with the Orioles, the one where he was the opening day starter, I believe, did not go well. Barely pitched for him. And then even the season where he had, I think, 39 starts or something, he did not do well either. So, that's the last time you had a Cy Young winner opening day starter for the Orioles. Before that, it was Moose, who technically, on those opening days, I think he started like 6 or 7 opening days for them, didn't have the Cy Young then. Pretty sure he won the Cy Young with the Yankees. Or actually, I don't know if he ever won a Cy Young, now that I think about it. I wrote his name down, but now I'm thinking about it, and I'm not sure. Either way, Messina, and then Sutcliffe. Now we're getting to the early to mid-90s. All I'm saying is, don't take this for granted, having Corbin Burns, a bona fide Cy Young candidate and past Cy Young winner just a couple years ago, to lead this rotation. It's a great thing to have. And there's a chance, if Kyle Bradish was healthy and pitching really well this spring, he would have had the opening day start. We'll never know. We won't know. Because Bradish is delayed. Bradish will be here in a month or so. Hopefully. 2 months, maybe. But don't take Corbin Burns for granted. Because despite some of the struggles in spring training, this man is absolutely going to be towards the top of the Cy Young this year. I'm telling you, he is. And yeah, I would think Grayson Rodriguez will be too. And I wouldn't be shocked if there's a surprise name also from these Orioles that find themselves in there, like a Tyler Wells. But understand, Corbin Burns is the ace that the Orioles brought him to be. The guy that when there's bleeding and he's up, he can stop the bleeding. The guy that other teams fear. The guy that's going to be starting game 1 of the ALDS for us, most likely. I guess if he's starting game 1 of the wild card, maybe he doesn't go game 1 ALDS. But maybe game 1 ALCS? Game 1 World Series? Corbin Burnes is the man that they brought in to take that ball. And I believe he's going to be there. He's got a great look to him for an Oriole, too. He really does. The hair, it just fits. It really does just fit. I love the look of Corbin Burnes in an Orioles jersey. It just looks right. So, I mentioned how I wanted to touch on two guys in Jackson Holliday and Coby Mayo a little more. I want to elaborate a little more about where I see them, okay? I still see Jackson Holliday, no surprise, the starting second baseman on this Orioles roster come opening day. I think he's proven enough to the Orioles that he needs to be on this team opening day. It's worth the benefit to have him be on opening day roster because I don't think he's going to go anywhere. Everything I hear is that he's a quick learn. He learns quickly at it, or he's a quick study, is the quote I heard from Brandon Hyde. He learns quickly from his mistakes. So even if he gets up to the majors and in the first month or so is not having great success, we saw that out of guys. We saw that out of Rushman. We saw that out of Henderson. There's no panic. We saw that out of Kowser. There's no panic. So don't be surprised if he starts opening day on this roster, struggles a bit, but stays on that roster. They stick with him because they see him slowly learning. And then you blink your eye and him going from batting 230 is now batting 280. Don't be surprised. Also, don't be surprised if he starts off like a man on fire. That Jackson Holliday takes the league by storm on opening day and never gives it up. Don't be surprised of that either. But the one thing that makes me worry about Jackson Holliday right now in the majors is his strikeout to walk ratio. It's abysmal. It seems like he doesn't want to take pitches or that other teams are going, let's go right at him and see what he's got. It could be one of either. It could be both. Because off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure last I saw he had 8 Ks to 1 walk. That's not going to cut it. But I'm not pressing the panic button. Just like on Corbin Burnes, I'm not pressing the panic button. I'm not even close to pressing it. I think it's something that corrects itself. And yeah, as a rookie, are you going to strike out more times than maybe you will as a veteran? Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully that's the case. Because that means you're learning. That means you're getting better when the league is adjusting to you. Adjusting to your adjustments. That you're continuing that success. So I'm not worried about his strikeouts because I think he's had a lot of lefty-lefty action, which will lead to more strikeouts than just a natural progression of going against righties and lefties. But we also see the success. Even lefty-lefty, that grand slam he hit was against a lefty. Now, you could say it was against the Blue Jays' Kikuchi, who seems to give up home runs to every Oriole every time he pitches against them. Just go ask Ryan Mountcastle. I'm pretty sure there's a couple other guys who have unbelievable stat lines too against Kikuchi. But ultimately, you need to see the left-on-left success, and I have seen that. We have seen that. And when he hits it, boy, is that ball coming off the bat hard. I mean, he is smoking these balls. Sometimes he seems to get under him a little. I've talked about how it seems like maybe he's a little too power happy. But hell, you're playing in the right division if you're a lefty that's a little too power happy, I think. Because between Camden Yards, Yankee Stadium, Fenway, you got some shorter porches in right. So hell, those pop-ups can wind up getting out of those parks. I'm not playing in Petco every day. It's not the biggest stadium out there. So Jackson Holliday, while there is at least that one thing to be a little cautious about getting too excited about everything else. I think you get a little excited about everything else. I've also heard them talking about his play at second base and how he's a quick study again. He, on the backfield, looks like a guy who has been playing second base for a decade. That's what they've been talking about. Tony Manzolino, third base coach, infield coach, Tony Manzolino has been preaching about, hey, on these backfields, it looks like he's been doing this his entire life. But he hasn't been. He hasn't played that much second base. So that gives you a little caution too, because in the game, it seems like maybe at times he can be a little more timid. Not to the point where he's got the yips, not to the point where it's a liability, and similar to like the Dodgers are seeing with Gavin Lux, where there's this talk about how he's just can't play defense right now. And it's an issue. We're not near there, gang. Jackson Holliday's still showing a whole heck of a lot of comfortability over at second base. Really, the one thing the Orioles said they would love to see more in-game situations be, and again, you can't manufacture these in a game, but double play opportunities that he has to start, okay? They've seen him be on the receiving end, the turning end of a couple double plays, but still only a couple. I don't think once in a game they've seen a ground ball hit to him with a man on first where they could turn that double play starting with him. And frankly, when they said that he's been on the turning end of that double play in games, he's been a little hesitant or possibly had not the best pivot or whatever the technicalities are that they're paying attention to. They didn't necessarily think he looked the best or the most comfortable. However, they talked about how hard of a worker he is, how smart he is, and how quick he learns off of it. They said it is not going to take long to develop that comfortability, they believe. And I believe it. And also, they're in a position that if Jackson Holliday is looking like he cannot play second base to the caliber they want, they can still have him in the starting lineup and readjust the infield. Because at that point, they can put Jackson at short, Gunnar at third, and Westberg at second. And while I think that that's not as talented of an infield setup as what they have now, with Gunnar at short, Jackson at second, and Westberg at third, I think it's more than manageable. And if they decide that the plays get made more often in that alignment, I think that they can adjust and go in that direction. Maybe not this season. Maybe they give it the whole season and then come back next season and readjust off of that, possibly. But we'll have to see. I think Jackson's going to be a star at second base. I think he'd be a star anywhere. But I especially think that give him a little more time to develop there, he's going to be making those plays look very easy more often than not. So I'm not worried about them, nor are they. That's why I still believe absolutely Jackson Holliday is on this team breaking camp to start opening day as the Orioles second baseman, potentially leading off. I don't know. We'll have to see. If it's a lefty, I don't think he'd lead off. Righty? Maybe. But maybe then you decide, let's go a different direction with the righty there, because then you have guys like Rushman and Henderson and everybody else at the top that can fill in. So we'll see. See how it all aligns. Again, we'll have an episode about roster construction going on later. We'll talk about that later, lineup construction, because there's a lot of different possibilities I think could play itself out. So then Coby Mayo is somewhat in a different boat as Jackson Holliday, because I don't think he starts the season on the major league camp. I think there's somebody who wants to make sure his glove gets those extra reps down in the minors more than I think they care about seeing Holliday's glove get more reps in the minors. But Coby Mayo is showing the Orioles everything. offensively, defensively. And I really want to make a point on his not only comp, but then athleticism. So the comp they keep making, especially in this camp, the comp they keep talking about is Austin Riley. And boy, can you see it, man. Both big boys, both very similar size and athletic ability. Because they're way more athletic than maybe they look naturally. But they're big guys, man, strapping guys. And I think right now they're saying Coby Mayo's throwing accuracy is probably the last thing that's developing for him, which is typical in these big third basemen, frankly. Most third base prospects, the last tool that really develops is that throwing accuracy. Okay? A lot of guys have big arms. A lot of guys hit for power. Takes some time to develop that accuracy, but it seems to me that he's doing everything he can to adjust. I read an article about how last year they made sure to make a point. They saw he was throwing very over the top, and they wanted him going more three-quarter slot. And it makes sense. It prevents the ball from getting spiked or sailed more often. But with a change of throwing motion, of course, that's going to maybe lengthen the amount of time it takes for him to improve his accuracy also. Because if you've been throwing one way your whole life and now you have to adjust to change a different way, well, that's going to take time. And you're going to have to focus on having to throw that way each time more than you're focusing on necessarily throwing it perfect each time. But the coaching staff and the developmental staff talked about how a lot of guys, when they give that intake to, when they tell you have to adjust the way you throw, something that's been natural to them their whole life, and they've been doing the same pretty much their whole life, a lot of guys can either push back or struggle to really do that. Apparently, Coby Mayo took that head on. He dove head first into the idea and really has been doing nothing but trying to just improve his game overall. And that shows you just how dedicated of a young man he is, just how great he is when it comes to taking this next step. And I think he's going to be in the majors before we know it. I think maybe 50 to 100 games into the season, Coby Mayo's up in the majors. Before the rosters expand, Coby Mayo should be up in the majors. And another cool, interesting part is, and I touched on his athletic ability, but just this quote, I believe it was Brandon Hyde had, or maybe it was Tony Mansolino, but either way, they talked about how he's going to get reps at third, and he's going to get reps at first, and he's even going to get reps in corner outfield spots. And they trust him at all four of those, at least in the future. However, they also are tempering your expectations on him playing anything but third base, right? So what does that mean? Because those kind of contradict themselves. Well, like everybody on the Orioles roster, essentially, it seems like the versatility is a huge thing that they emphasize. We know that is the case. So naturally, you're going to see what a guy can provide. And you're going to make sure that he's in a position that if the day comes where you need him to step up and be a first baseman, he's not taken aback and is going in there blind. If the day comes where he's on the major league roster and we need him to step into right or left, he feels comfortable enough, and we feel comfortable enough with him in that position where there are no hesitations. Coby, we trust you. Go out there. We know you can do it. Now, is he going to be the best defensive corner outfielder? Absolutely not. But you have half the guys in the league at corner outfield spots that play average to below average defense. You have guys all the time that they might make a play or two here and there, but ultimately they're not there for their glove. They're there for their bat, and they have to play in the field in order to get their bat in the lineup. Let's say a team like the Phillies, who has Kyle Schwarber, or even in recent years, Bryce Harper, sticking at DH. Well, where's Nick Castellanos going to play? Is Nick Castellanos the greatest fielder in the league? No. But he can play a decent field. He has some good moments out there. And ultimately, you need his bat in the lineup if you're that team. That's going to be how Coby Mayo comes. And obviously, this is a no-brainer, but I would love nothing more than to see him develop into Austin Riley. Can you imagine how special this lineup's going to be if Coby Mayo develops into Austin Riley? I mean, think about the names we're talking about. Adley Rutschman, we know all about. Gunnar Henderson, we know all about. Jackson Holliday, we're seeing all about. And now Coby Mayo, if he turns into Austin Riley? I couldn't be any more excited about the future of these Orioles. And frankly, I say it almost every episode, but we're seeing the future now. We're seeing the future in front of our eyes. Because there were those dark days. And this might be the last thing I'm going to touch on in this episode, but I've been saying it for a little while now. I kind of want to pull back the curtain on my Orioles fandom. Give you some background into me and why I'm here, guys. Why I'm sitting in front of this camera talking to you about the Baltimore Orioles. And I might wind up getting choked up and emotional at one point because that's what the Orioles bring out in me. I can't tell you how special it is when the Orioles are doing well. How much it means to me in my life. And just the happiness it brings me on a daily basis to see the Orioles in the position they are right now. To take you back to last season, I teared up about these Orioles, legitimately teared up all the time, close to every day, because I think about them all the time. I do. And they make me so happy and so proud. And it's the kind of thing that, I mean, listen, I was born into it. Now, I told you in the last episode or two, I was born in Philly, raised in South Jersey, my whole life, still live in South Jersey. So the idea of saying I was born into it might sound crazy, but I was. My dad was a huge Orioles fan, and he raised me as a huge Orioles fan. My birthday's in the middle of February, right around, give or take, when spring training starts every year. And my parents took me to an Orioles spring training when I was just a month old. Heck, maybe even less than a month old. I don't know anything about kids, and it seems crazy to me that you take a child on a plane that young, but they did it. My mom's grandparents were living in Florida or something like that at the time, and they wanted, they couldn't travel, and they wanted to have them see the baby, me. But my dad made sure to find time to bring me to Orioles spring training, and of course I don't remember it, but that's just how much I've grown up with it. A lot of the things you see behind me were gifts and things that I acquired throughout the years, whether it's the Machado gnome or this rally towel from last year's playoff game. But the Orioles mean so much to me. It goes so deep because of different factors. The main one being my dad. Now, for those that know me, you probably know this, but for those that don't, my dad died almost 11 years ago. And, I mean, it was crushing. He was my best friend. I love him to death. And I still think about him every day. And he was a diehard Baltimore Orioles fan. He grew up in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, listening to the Orioles on the radio and loving them. So much so that despite the fact that he then went to school in Pitt and then moved to the Philadelphia area and was a Philadelphia trial attorney and all of these different places that he could have grown fandom into other teams, he never did. So much so that when I was born, like I said, he raised me to be an Orioles fan. And I would say I didn't have much of a choice, but I did. I could have obviously chosen anyone I wanted to, but for me, it was never a choice. It was always the Orioles. It was always the Baltimore Orioles. And growing up, despite the fact that we lived in South Jersey, we had season tickets to the Orioles, the Wednesday home game package. And so 13 games a year we had for Wednesday nights. And I probably went to maybe 10 of them a year with him. But we did that all through out elementary school, middle school, even into high school, I think we did it. And it meant everything to me. Going to Camden Yards with my dad is one of the most special memories I have. And we sat in section 27 every year, towards the back, but still great seats. And I'll never forget those moments. My first day of first grade, one of the games in our package happened to be the game Cal was tying the record. And despite the fact that I was young, I'll never forget walking up to the stadium with him. And, I'm probably 6 years old at the time or so. And I remember people offering him thousands of dollars for these tickets. And at the time, as a kid like that, I'm thinking that's years worth of salary. Money, is funny when you're back then. And it was the early to mid 90s. So money went a lot more longer back then too. But just the idea that he would turn down this money for us to go see this game, to see my hero, Cal Ripken, tie Lou Gehrig's record. And, I tell a lot of people I was there, and people were always like, it's a shame he couldn't have gone to the game, he broke it. But what I tell them is I went to a bunch of games after that day where he broke the record. Remember, Cal kept the streak alive for a long time after that day. But there's only one game that he tied the record. And it's special knowing that I was at that game with my dad. And despite its fact that it's not a memory I can vividly remember everything about, I do have small memories, like I said, walking up to the stadium with him on that day. And there are things that will be with me forever. And these are the reasons why the Orioles are tied into me so much. And I identify myself as a Baltimore Oriole. We touched earlier in this episode, obviously, I'm 35 years old. They haven't had much success in my life. Hell, I've maybe only seen 10 or so 500 or more seasons in my life. Truly, if you think about it. Maybe slightly more, but either way, it's been a lot of losing seasons throughout my life. And there's never been a part of me that's wanted to abandon the Orioles. There's never been a part of me that's like, I can't take this anymore. Because to me, that's always life. To me, the Orioles and my life have synced up in so many ways that it's funny. Because in my own life, there has been a lot of failure, like most people, and a lot of disappointments. And some moments where you really thought great things were about to happen, and then you blinked and the opportunity was gone, and it wasn't there. And you didn't know the next time it would come back. Might be a long time till you get an opportunity as good as that one. And that's been my Orioles life, at least. But frankly, just like the Orioles, you never stop. Never stop trying. You never stop attempting to get it back. You never quit, ultimately. I had a poster growing up in my room. And I loved it so much, I even took it to West Virginia with me when I went to college and put it up in my dorm room freshman year. And it was a picture of Cal Ripken, probably a picture of him like waving to people with his arm up. And it said perseverance. And then it had the description of perseverance under it. And it's funny, I actually have this as the background of my phone still because of how much it means to me. It's been everything, not just in my own life, not just on a daily basis, but not just professionally, but also with the Orioles also. You persevere through those hard times. You keep going through those hard times, and you never give up. You never stop moving forward, and you never give up the idea that you're going to get there one day. You're going to break through one day. And it's all going to come together. And so when I watch the Orioles do so well, like I did last year, when the joy they bring me, it brings tears to my eyes, man. It really does. Because it means everything to me. I always say if the Orioles win a World Series, I can die a happy man. In a past episode, I talked about how I'm waiting to get my first tattoo until the Orioles win the World Series. And that's true. I am. You want to talk with the connection of my dad? Growing up, my dad had a few rules, but one of them, he wasn't a hard ass by any means, but he could be at times, and he had a few rules. No tattoos and no piercings. Now, sure, growing up, maybe I had thought that might stop me, but kids are rebellious. I would be rebellious about rules. I would break rules just because my dad said them. It doesn't matter. I would break them sometimes. So the idea of no tattoos, no piercings, I'll just put this out there. I never wanted a piercing. I've never had any interest in getting pierced anywhere. So that never appealed to me. So that part of the rule was easy. But the tattoo, you have moments. You think, that'd be cool. Oh, I would like that. Oh, why not? Screw it. But I made a deal with my dad at some point. I believe, I don't know, high school-ish. And I got him to agree that if the Orioles win a World Series, I can get a tattoo. And I told him it would be an Orioles championship tattoo, and I already have the design pretty much set. But he agreed to that, and it's funny, almost 11 years later after he died, I'm still in the mindset that I can't not follow through with that. Like, that means that bond, that agreement is so stupid, and it means so much to me. And I'm a 35-year-old adult. My dad's been gone for over a decade. There's no reason why I should have that stop me from getting a tattoo if I want one. But the thing is, I don't want one until I can get that one. I don't want to break it because it's everything. The championship would mean so much to me. It would finally give me that championship. As stupid as that sounds, like, it means so much to me. It means everything. I told you that I was born in Philly and grew up in South Jersey. So it's no surprise to you that I've been around Eagles fans my whole life. Philadelphia Eagles fans. And I'm not an Eagles fan. But, in fact, I've hated the Eagles for most of my life. Truly. But when they won the championship back, I don't know, probably 7 years ago or whatever it may have been, it was one of these moments where, as much as I hated the franchise, I was so happy for the fan base and the old people and the kids I grew up with and my friends that had never seen a championship, had never won a Super Bowl. And the team means so much to them and is such a part of their blood and lifeline that I was so happy to see them break through on that. And it's a similar feeling for the Orioles because while 1983, our last championship, isn't nearly as long ago as the Eagles' championship before there was even a Super Bowl, I don't know, 60s, early 60s, I think. I mean, still, we haven't been close to the World Series in my lifetime, at least winning one. Haven't even gotten to one. I mean, 5, 6 years removed our last World Series from me being born. So all I've known really is pain and misery of these Baltimore Orioles. And that's why these little moments that happen, these little stints, they mean everything to me. When we were able to have that Wieters, Jones, Hardy core bring us out of those 13 losing years, those dark, dark years, it meant everything to see those good moments. And so, despite the fact that my dad was gone, I decided I was buying season tickets then because I needed to be a part of those moments. I needed to be a part of the big games and the postseason games. And I was there on all the postseason home games. When we swept the Tigers, the Delman Young double game, still gives me chills to this moment. The loudest I've ever heard Camden Yards, the loudest I've ever heard any stadium. I was there with my good friend Tim, and we were down the right field line, kind of near the left field foul pole. And when that ball landed in, and Hardy found his way from first to home, I mean, that place erupted. And truly, I had tears in my eyes. I was screaming, we're going to win the World Series. I was a little ahead of myself. But with that, because, a week later, Jeremy Guthrie was sweeping us out of the ALCS. And these Royals were the ones going. But, man, those teams, they mean so much, man. And so these Orioles, the last year and a half, the success that they've had, the idea that last year I'm going into the season telling everybody they're one of the best teams in baseball and talking up how great of a roster they have and how these guys, these players are just so special. And to see them actually accomplish what I thought they would, and even more, see them win 100 games for the first time in my lifetime, brought tears to my eyes. It really did. Brings tears to my eyes now. I can't emphasize enough how much the Baltimore Orioles success means to me. When I was growing up, the Orioles meant just as much to me. And it's funny, I couldn't say my R's very well. I had to go to some speech therapy a little. I've gotten myself to the point where I can pretty much say R's without an issue. Every now and then it squeaks out, and you might hear that. In fact, right before I started this, I had one where I said that. But it just shows you the love I've had for the Orioles, that growing up as a little kid in South Jersey, you go to school for the first day and you're introducing yourself and got to tell a fun fact. And every time I would say, I'm a big Baltimore Orioles fan. And every time, they'd go, what'd you just say? What are you a fan of? The Baltimore Orioles. And listen, what do you think? I enjoyed those moments struggling with those R's then? No. A normal kid would have steered away from any word that had R's. But that's how much they meant to me. That's how much they mean to me. I don't care if it's embarrassing. I don't care if I can't say it properly. The Baltimore Orioles are everything to me. And they always have been. And they always will be. I love these O's more than anything. And it's infectious. It's why I'm here talking, because I've done podcasts and I've tried production companies, and I've actually created a couple sports handicapping companies where we sell gambling picks and all of that. And all of that's fun, and all of that I enjoy. And I have a passion for. But ultimately, when I was looking at my next project to do, when I was deciding what to do, I want this to be it. I feel like it has to be it, because I don't see any way there's another person that can talk Baltimore Orioles with me as passionately as I can, as much as I can, with the enthusiasm and love and passion as I do. I love nothing more than talking Orioles baseball and talking about these guys and reliving the past and enjoying the memories that were good and laughing about the tough times. And the idea of continuing to go to that stadium throughout those 13 losing seasons and still enjoy ourselves despite the fact that what we were watching was putrid. It feels like everything's been working itself up to this moment. Me, as far as it comes with production and entertainment and creating and wanting to do something in this realm, to the Orioles finally having this moment where it seems like they're bound to break through that last barrier or two and not only get to the World Series, but win the World Series. And again, I told you I'm very optimistic, and I believe truly that you gotta believe. You gotta be optimistic for things to happen and work out. You have to have a good mindset, but I think it's important to be realistic too. And I believe my optimism in these Orioles is very realistic. And this was what I was preaching last year. And I came very close to starting this podcast last year. And I told you, I believe in the first episode, I'm always worried to be a bit of a jinx. I didn't want to come up here and spew all of this optimism blindly. I didn't want to do this and have it fall flat on their face. And kind of be in this situation where not only was I disappointed that it didn't work out for them, but I was disappointed in myself because I would put that on me. As stupid as that sounds, as fanatical as that sounds, I would put that on me. But coming into this year, I had to. I was in a position where I knew I was starting something new, and it had to be Baltimore Orioles talk. I'm a bartender in my day-to-day life, I guess, for my day job, you can call it, even though it's a night job. But again, I'm in a sports bar outside of Philadelphia. Everyone talks Philly sports nonstop. But when it comes to me, everybody has been talking Baltimore Orioles to me. Not that they don't talk Philly sports or whatever else, but understand it's infectious how I talk about the Orioles. It's important to me. It's so important to me. And so I can't help but talk about it. If somebody brings something up to me and I haven't really been paying attention to it, I'm not going to say, and what I'm going to tell them is, on it, I don't know. I haven't really looked or thought about. All I think about are these Baltimore Orioles from beginning to end of my day. And that's all I want to talk about. And I've been telling people close to my life since I've started this podcast that I can't see how this doesn't wind up in something bigger for me. And this is going to be a little personal, I guess, but I don't see how that success doesn't come to me off of this. And yet that's not why I'm doing it at all. I'm doing it because I love it and I'm passionate about it and I enjoy it. And I don't think there's anybody out there who wants to talk Orioles more than I do, that enjoys talking Orioles as much as I do, and is as passionate about the Orioles as I am. They might be at my level, but nobody's more. And I can do this every single day. I do this every single day, whether I come on here with you, whether I'm pouring drinks, or I'm just sitting on my couch and somebody happens to text me about these Orioles. Because that's how special they are. And that's what's happening. And that's what I've brought on myself because of how much I talk about these Orioles. And I could see one day, this might sound insane to some, but I could see one day, if I keep this up and I keep sticking to this and I continue coming on here and talking to you folks about the Baltimore Orioles every single day, well, that's going to lead to something huge. And I hope that leads to something huge with the Orioles. And that in 30 years, 40 years, when I'm retiring, they have me out on the field. They have a banner on the warehouse for me. I want to be known in Birdland forever. I want my picture up in the concourse when people are walking past and they see the great commentators of the past and they see what, and I'm not saying I'm going to be the play-by-play guy or a color guy. I don't know what capacity I'm going to have, but I know it's going to work out and I know it's going to come. And again, it's the perseverance that continues going. And that's why I have that still as my phone background. That poster of Cal Ripken with perseverance. Because that's what it all is. And I'm going to persevere through the times when only a dozen people listen to this. Because there's going to come a time where all of Birdland's listening to this. And while I'm going to opening day this year and nobody there might recognize me from this, there's going to come a day where I go to opening day and nobody can't recognize me. Where little kids that ask who I am, parents are telling their kids who I am in regards to the Orioles. I want to get remembered as being an Oriole legend. And I can't do it on the field. And I'm not a coach. But boy, can I talk Orioles. And that's why I'm here. Not for the accolades. Not for the success. Not for the money. Not for any of it. I hope all of that comes, but I'm not here for it. I'm here just to talk Orioles baseball. That's why that's the name of the show, gang. Talkin Orioles baseball. Because that's all I want to do. That's what I want to spend my life doing. You know that old expression or question where therapists or whatever would be like, or counselors in school would go, if I gave you $1 million, what would you do? And the answer is supposed to be, oh, if you say collect cards, well, then you should go work on cards. What, yada, 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 whatever it is. Well, if they said that to me, truthfully, I'd say, I want to talk Baltimore Orioles. I just want to sit here and talk Orioles baseball to anybody that will listen. And that's why I'm not going anywhere, and this program's not going anywhere. And we're going to continue to develop this and build this and make this the best Orioles podcast that's ever been known. Because it all stems from real passion. And as we move forward in everything, we're going to continue adding layers. It's not always just going to be me sitting here screaming about the Orioles. Hopefully in the future, we'll have on some real Oriole legends to talk Orioles with us. We'll have on some beat writers for the Orioles to talk Orioles with us. We'll take calls from Birdland. And let some of you come on here and talk Orioles baseball. Ask questions. Give your take. Give your opinion. But that's what this is all going to become. And it's all happening, I think, at the perfect time. Because if this was 10 years ago, nobody would care. You wouldn't want me talking up the team there. You wouldn't even want me talking about the team that they were putting out there. It was bad there for a while, gang. Even 5 years ago, it was bad. But it's not bad anymore. And frankly, I think the future, the next 20, 30 years of Baltimore Orioles baseball while yes, it will have its valleys, will have an insane amount of peaks. And I want to be there along for the ride. Because either way, I am along for the ride. Either way, I'm with them. Either way, every single day, I'm trying to read everything I can. I'm trying to see everything I can. I'm trying to watch every single pitch. I'm trying to learn everything I can about these Orioles only because I love it and I want it. So it means everything to me, guys. And that's why I'm coming on here. That's why I started this. That's why I'm talking to you about the Orioles. And that's why I'm going to continue keep talking about the Orioles. Because I absolutely love them. And it absolutely has to do with my dad. But it also has to do with just fitting in my life, man. I've never truly been a winner. Sure, I've won some things here and there along the way. But ultimately, it's been a lot of persevering through toughness and disappointment. And listen, there are times when there's bad luck. There are times when you deserve one thing that you don't get. And then there's other times where you got exactly what you deserved in that disappointment because you didn't put in the work. You didn't do things the right way. You didn't do things the Oriole way. And that's another reason why I always identified with the Orioles, because they had this way about going about things the right way. That's what it was all about. Not only winning, but winning the right way. Doing the little things the right way. Putting in the work. Showing up every day. Keeping the best mindset, but also understanding. Again, being optimistic, but also being realistic and understanding what's to come. So I love nothing more than these Baltimore Orioles outside of my fiance and my family and maybe my dogs, even though my dogs sometimes frustrate the heck out of me. But ultimately, I love these Baltimore Orioles, man. And it's all I want to spend my life doing. It's talking Orioles. So it sounds crazy in episode 7 to sit here and tell you that I want to be, when I retire, I want to be honored at Camden Yards. But hopefully, in 7 years, that's not a crazy statement. And in 27 years, 37 years, you know, maybe it's happening. Maybe it's happening. And guess what? I hope we have a lot of success and championships along the way. I do. That's all I want, gang. If you gave me the two options of being successful in this endeavor or seeing the Orioles win a championship, even just one, I take that championship all day. And I'll wipe my hands clean of any thoughts that what this could bring. But again, I'm not doing this for any fame. I'm not doing this for fortune. I'm not doing this for any other reason than my absolute love and passion for the Baltimore Orioles. I told you Nick Markakis was one of my favorite players. Obviously, Cal Ripken was my hero, like I said. Still have him as the background of my phone with that poster. Well, my dad's favorite player was Mark Belanger growing up. The Blade, number 7. One of these. I think he's right there. Anyway. It's just the type of guy that, listen, man, scrappy. Yeah, listen, he wasn't the best hitter. Playing a lot of defense, smoking a lot of cigs. Kind of cool, the Blade, though, but like, just this grinder, man. Just a grinder. And ultimately, that's what I am. I'm a grinder. So, dug pretty deep into that. There's certainly moments that I could touch on more. Got plenty of funny stories also along the way. But plenty of time to get into all of that, gang. Like I said, I'm not going anywhere. This is going to be a regular thing. And come the season, I'm hoping to talk to you every day. So I know this one went a little long. It's going to happen. We had some good stuff to talk about, some interesting topics. Wanted to give my takes on some things, and frankly, wanted to pull back the curtain on myself and tell you a little about my Orioles fandom. About how every Christmas I'd wake up hoping that I was getting something Orioles. And I would, like this jersey. So, we're going to call it a wrap. Hopefully be back to talk to you in the next day or so. And yeah, season is coming like a jail on wheels, gang. I cannot wait for opening day. Truly, cannot wait. I'd love to see some of the fans in Birdland there recognize me. But if not, heck, could be my last opening day where fans don't recognize me. But again, not doing anything here for the recognition, not doing anything for the success and the fame. Just doing it purely because I just love talking Baltimore Orioles baseball, gang. I love it. I absolutely love it. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up this episode. Excited to get back to, watching these Orioles. And I'll be excited to come back and talk to you soon about it. Until then, gang, this was the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Let's go!
Talking baseball, baseball.